The podcast is Going to the Conspiracy, featuring Auckland's Josh Addison and Bucharest's Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith.
Hello, you're listening to the podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy. My name is Josh Addison, sitting in my bedroom, for an interesting change rather than my living room, in Auckland, New Zealand, while on the other side of the planet, the good Dr. Matthew R. X. Dentith is sitting in what I assume is his bedroom, in Bucharest, Romania. How are you, Matthew?
Well, I'm feeling a sense of deja vu, Joshua. A huge sense of deja vu. I want to make a reference to the song Dr. Feelgood, but I don't know why.
No, it's almost as though the call quality last time we tried was so bad we had to hang up, restart your router and try again. But that's just craziness, quite frankly. I can't imagine a universe in which that would happen.
That would be revisionist history, and we have no truck with that.
Right. Just in case the quality turns to crap, I'll make a disclaimer at the start and say it's possible there won't be a video for this week's episode, although quite frankly the video is looking fine right now. But you never can tell, quite frankly. So, it's a new week. Last week, while rabbiting on at the end and talking about news radio, a favourite subject of Matthew's and one that I'm quite fond of myself, we thought, hey, that Joe Rogan who's on news radio is a bit of a celebrity conspiracy theorist. Why don't we talk about celebrity conspiracy theorists? Why, we could do that next episode. And wouldn't you know it, this episode is next episode.
We are fulfilling promises like they're going out of fashion.
So, I guess before we actually start talking about celebrities and the conspiracy theories they espouse, we should jump into the news in some fashion.
Like we're going down a water slide. Let's slide into the news with a dive bomb.
Breaking conspiracy theories in the news.
Right, so let's slide into the news on our bellies like a penguin. For comical effect.
Squawk, squawk, squawk.
That is exactly what the sound a penguin makes. Hurricane Harvey, as we speak, I think, continues to batter America, or maybe it's finished its battering, but there's been a hell of a lot of damage done, and flooding and so on, and loss of life, of course. But just as we can't have, say, a celebrity death without conspiracy theories popping about it, we can't really have any sort of a major meteorological event happen either, or indeed seismological or any sort of thing like that, without conspiracy theories popping up, and I understand Harvey's no exception.
Yes, Hurricane Harvey has been blamed on weather manipulation technology.
Have they gone straight for HAARP? Are people still talking about HAARP? Even though it's
HAARP
shut down?
does get mentioned, yes, although of course people claim HAARP has only been apparently, air quotes, shut down, and of course is still fully operational.
Yes, just like the Death Star. In fact, almost exactly like the Death Star, I suppose.
I could make a really inappropriate joke like, evacuate Houston in our moment of triumph. I think you overestimate their ability, but that would just be inappropriate.
That really would. But yes, so no massive surprise there, but the conspiracy theories, they're around, you just kind of can't stop them.
No, not really.
So did you want to go into NZ fact check?
Yeah, so this isn't strictly conspiratorial, but it is somewhat suspicious. So we have an election going on in Aotearoa, New Zealand at the moment.
In fact, it's the 1st of September as we record this, so we can safely say the election is this month.
This month. And on Twitter a few days ago, a new account turned up called NZ Fact Check that was going, look, if you want to find out what's been said in the debate and whether they're factual, refer to NZ Fact Check. And people looked into NZ Fact Check to discover that it's been authorised by a senior member of the National Party, which is, of course, the current government. And so NZ Fact Check does not appear to be the neutral, non-partisan source it claimed to be, but in fact an element of the National Party designed to basically fisk any statements the Labour candidate Jacinda Ardern made during the election. And lo and behold, during the leaders' debate yesterday, NZ Fact Check was only fisking Ardern's statements and not those by Bill English. So not quite a conspiracy. Turns out that they did everything above board. The authorization statement was on the account, But it turns out you don't have to say the account belongs to the National Party. You just have to say it's been authorized by someone who belongs to the National Party without identifying their party affiliation. So not conspiratorial, but certainly slightly suspicious, and the kind of thing that makes you think that the government of the day might be using dodgy politics to try and make their campaign look all the cleaner.
Actually, this reminds you of something that we never got into last week when we were talking about electoral fraud and all that bizarre. The fact that all election advertising in New Zealand is required now to have a little statement on the bottom saying authorised by, and then whichever representative of whichever political party sort of is the authoriser of that bit of political advertising, and it has to list their address and phone number or something. Basically, a human identity has to be put to every single piece of political advertising. Now, did that come about because of the pledge card business? Or what? There was one particular political scandal back in the Clark government, I think, that these compulsory authorisation statements came about because of that. Do you remember which one it was?
So I believe the pledge card scandal, which was a card being sent out to people all around the country about things that the Labour government, if re-elected, were going to do, was a case of them breaching this particular standard.
Yeah,
so I think the standard was they had to have an authorising statement, and they didn't, so they broke electoral law. The authorising statement predates the pledge card, from what I recall, although listeners back home who know more about this may decide to write in to our many email addresses and correct us if in fact I'm wrong about this.
I thought the pledge card thing, now that I think about it, the problem with that was that it was paid out of the wrong fund, wasn't it? It was because in New Zealand political parties are only sort of they have a specific fund that they're supposed to use for their election advertising, and this pledge card mail out was paid for from a different pool of money. So essentially, that
I think you're right. Actually, I think from memory, what happened was that the pledge card should have been paid out of the electoral funds, but was in fact paid out of the Labour leader's funds. Yeah. So the leader used her money for the election when actually the cost should have gone to the election itself.
Yeah, so it was a point I meant to bring up last week and forgot that at the time when that happened, I remember the sort of opponents of the government, and especially the libertarian types and so on, talking about how if Clark wins, they'll have stolen the election. I think, was that the election when National finally got in? I think it was the last one. But and thinking to myself, yes, there's your voter fraud in New Zealand. I can just imagine talking to people from other sort of more despotic regimes saying, oh, in my country they round up opponents of the government and execute them. In my country they'll beat the shit out of you if you vote the wrong way. Oh, well, what about yours? Oh, you'll never believe it. In New Zealand, right, the leading political party published little pieces of cardboard and paid for them with the wrong money.
Dun, dun,
yes,
dun.
It was all just a little bit feeble and pathetic. But anyway, maybe that's my hang-up and I should just get over it. Talk about George Soros some more, Matthew, because I know how you love to.
Well, so the Hungarian Prime Minister, Viktor Orban, was in Romania recently and spent his time dissing George Soros in the media, talking about how George Soros is setting to Muslimize Europe. i.e. he wants to make Europe into a Muslim paradise.
And as we've spoken about before, and indeed devoted an entire episode to in the past, hating on George Soros is kind of a bit of a national sport over there, isn't it? He's quite the whipping boy.
Yes, so George Soros, who is all for open governments, is the kind of person who gets opposed by leaders of political parties which are not committed to openness or transparency, but more committed to let us do our thing without any kind of oversight whatsoever.
And indeed, when we talked about George Soros before, I don't remember the Islamification stuff being as big a thing. Is it? Again, he really just does seem to be the bogeyman of the right, isn't he? Everything you don't like, George Soros is trying to do.
Basically, if you don't like tea, George Soros is trying to make you drink tea.
And if you do like
coffee,
tea, he's
George
trying to
Soros.
ban it.
Well, it's true. He both is for and against tea at the same time.
Yeah, so that's I guess that's kind of more of the same, really.
Yeah, basically.
And almost more of the same here local to New Zealand. When once again the police have been caught out doing a thing that they weren't supposed to have been doing. You may remember the whole business about this Rorschach person, a hacker going by the name of Rorschach, who did he hack again? Was it the National Party, or was it individuals?
It was Cameron Slater, Matthew Hewson, and other related
He
people who were
got them to
ostensibly working for the National Party without actually being members of the National Party.
And this Rorschach individual, he was the one who supposedly was hired to hack the Labour Party's website, or was it the Daily? I can't even remember.
No.
So
that was the Ben Rechinger scandal. Was the hacking of the Labour Party.
Okay, so I'm getting my political scandals involving hackers mixed up. Anyway. And this is to do with Nicky Hager and all his business, isn't it?
Indeed.
There's too many political scandals that I don't care enough about to fully research. But the latest development in the whole Nicky Hager Rorschach thing is that the police have basically been we've had them spotted. They've got caught illegally surveilling people who they were not supposed to be surveilling, or in manners where they're not supposed to be surveilling. Now it seems they've also been caught illegally obtaining personal information from people under circumstances where those people should have been covered by the New Zealand Privacy Act. So I think this had already been shown to have happened to Nicky Hager, a local sort of activist, journalist, publisher. But it's also now been shown to have happened to Martin Bradbury, who is a local blogger, runs a left-wing website here in New Zealand. He's been around for a long time. We don't think super highly of Martin Bradbury, perhaps. It would be fair
really.
To say he seems to be a little
highly
bit
of him at all.
Yeah, he's a divisive figure, very much on the left though, and regardless of what you think of him, it was very definitely not okay for the police to have obtained his personal banking information, essentially by going to the bank and saying, go on, give us his information. They didn't get a warrant. They basically just asked for it, and the bank said, yeah, okay. And the Privacy Act is fairly clear that that's not how things are supposed to work. And indeed, Bomber being the nickname of Martin Bradbury, by which he's more commonly known, Bomber didn't even find out that this had been done until he tried to extend his credit with the bank and was told, no, we're not going to do that because your records are under investigation or something. He was like, you what? So, yes, as I say, regardless of what you think of the man himself, once again, the police have kind of been caught with their hand in the cookie jar, it seems.
Yeah, so essentially the police in the hunt for Rorschach were looking for any kind of financial links to the mysterious Rorschach person in question. And so they basically decided to go fishing for information around a bunch of people they thought might be associated with him. And thus they told Martin Bradbury's bank that Martin Bradbury may well have been engaging in credit fraud, at which point the bank engaged in an investigation and basically froze his ability to extend his line of credit, despite the fact that when it was investigated, there was no link, and the Privacy Commissioner has said, actually, the police needed a warrant to be able to look for that information. They didn't provide the bank in question with a warrant, and the bank gave it to them anyway, thus causing harm to one of their customers, and that's not okay.
No, it really is not. Continuing in the theme of developments to older cases in New Zealand, we've talked about the case of Tainapora before, back in our true crime New Zealand style episode, which we established was more than 100 episodes ago now, so you may not have remembered this, but the case of Tainapora is one where about 20 years ago a man named Tainapora was arrested for the rape and murder of a woman called Susan Burdett. The conviction was somewhat dodgy. He confessed, quote unquote, to the police, and yet his story kept changing. He essentially appeared to be trying to tell a story so he could get some of the reward money police were offering for information about the case. He first claimed that he sort of knew. He claimed that he was like a lookout for the people who did it, and then he claimed that he was there when it happened, and then he claimed that he actually did it, and was convicted on the basis of that confession. Things got even worse when DNA evidence was eventually used to prove that Miss Burdett was raped by a known serial rapist who was already in prison, and while they could therefore
always
acted alone, indeed. But while they were able to prove that Tainapura did not rape the woman, they couldn't prove either way who murdered her. And since he was already in prison for her murder, they thought, oh well, that'll do. And so he stayed in prison for another 10 years or something, possibly even more than that. So a couple of years ago, his case was finally quashed entirely. Not a there needs to be a retrial. It was just straight out, he did not do it. You imprisoned a wrong person. End of story. And then there came to the talk of compensation, which is where the latest development has been. And when we talked about these cases before, the reason things got conspiratorial essentially was that it always appeared to be a case of institutions trying to protect themselves. The police and the government didn't want the integrity of the justice system to be brought into disrepute by it turning out that this conviction was dodgy. And so they maybe didn't put as much energy toward it as they should have. And again, institutions have been challenged because we reported a little while ago that they'd ruled that he was to be given around just over $2 million in compensation. But the calculation that was used to come up with this figure, which is essentially $100,000 per year unjustly spent in jail, those guidelines were put down in the year 2000. So there's been 17 years of inflation since then, which has led people to say, well, hang on, that possibly doesn't seem fair if his compensation is being calculated using equations that are 17 years out of date. And so that was questioned. It's gone up to the High Court, and the High Court has now ruled that yes, actually, his compensation is insufficient. The government tried to sort of say, "Hey, look, our hands are tied. These are the rules, so we just got to give him the compensation that it says in the rules." And the High Court has said, "No, your hands are in no way tied. You're not restricted by it at all." The ruling didn't actually say what his compensation would be. It's just shot down the arguments that his compensation must be at the current amount and can't possibly be changed. So there are still developments to become, but again, it just sort of seemed to be a little bit of the case of the institutions. What's the term? Institutional capture? Is that the term that describes this? Yeah.
And what's interesting about this is that the High Court judgment basically goes, look, there's nothing that stops the minister in charge going back to cabinet and saying, look, we should top up Porter's compensation by inflation. And so that's expected now that the minister will do that. It will be interesting to see whether she actually does. And what's particularly interesting is that the police aren't happy with this particular response. So they're not happy with basically being racked over the knuckles once again.
So yes, it'll be interesting to see with an election less than a month away now, whether they do actually do something about it in the next couple of weeks, or just kind of just file it in the too hard pile and wait until after the election when things settle down. But we'll just have to see. So, Matthew, the American College of Pediatricians. That sounds like a respectable, what am I looking for? Academical sort of an organisation. What wise and interesting things have they been saying?
So they recently came out with a statement that I'll try that again. They came out with a statement that's saying that transgenderism in children amounts to child abuse. Now, this sounds fairly big. We have the American College of Pediatricians making this particular claim. But what's interesting about this, and this doesn't seem to be reported on the websites that are going, look, once again, we have proof that medical professionals don't believe that transgender individuals are in any way healthy, is that the American College of Pediatricians is in fact a conservative group of only about 500 members, and the actual national body is in fact the American Academy of Pediatrics, which has 64,000 members. So this is once again a classic case of an organization that sounds quite authoritative, making what in consequence sound like authoritative statements, actually being an astroturf group which is actually following a political bias and making claims hoping the media will report them as being the standard wisdom.
Not unlike NZ Fact Check, I suppose.
Indeed, in fact, we probably should have merged those two together.
That would have been clever. Oh well.
What a pity we're not clever.
No, it would be nice. It would be nice. But oh well, what can we do? So you had an update on the Jimmy Savile case?
Yes, so reporter Liz McKean, who was one of the people who first tried to report on Jimmy Savile and his paedophilic ways, has died mysteriously. And people are saying that this is yet another death linked to people trying to uncover a larger pedophile ring, with the implication being she was killed for what she knew. Now, people who are talking about Liz McKean's death mention other people, like, say, Jill Dando, who used to be a presenter on Crime Watch UK, who was murdered in 1999 in a crime which is still unsolved. And it is claimed that she, too, was trying to uncover a pedophile ring in the BBC at that particular point in time. But this story doesn't quite pan out the way that people would like it to. For one thing, the Jill Dando story, the claim that she was investigating a pedophile ring only appeared in 2014. So many, many moons after her death, people then linked her unsolved murder to the pedophile ring, i.e. once it came out that Jimmy Savile was a pedophile, people kind of backported other mysterious deaths to try and make sense of them. And while Liz McKean's death is unfortunate, it's not really mysterious. She died of a heart attack. Now, she was only 54, and that is very sad. But people dying of heart attacks at age 54 are not that mysterious. And so it only ends up needing explanation if you think the heart attack was actually caused by some kind of external mean. And it doesn't seem there are any medical professionals or family members attached to Liz McKean who are going, actually, there's something mysterious about her death. They're all going, this is very unfortunate, and please don't try to make this part of your larger narrative.
Has David Icke had anything to say about this? Given his...
I have to say I have not checked, but I kind of assume he may well have something to say about this. I haven't really looked at the David Icke forums for a few months now. Sometimes it's better not to look. Although really, as a researcher into conspiracy theories, I probably should swallow that nascent fear I have in the chill of my bones and actually go have a look.
Because David Icke, of course, has been talking
was famously right about Jimmy Savile.
Yes. Whether that proves that he has deeper connections about the secret underpinnings of the world, or whether it's a case of a stop clock being right twice a day, we don't know. But yes, I'm sure he would have had something to say about that. So, one last thing. Yesterday, I think, as we record, was the 20th anniversary of the death of Princess Di. Which I don't know. Was there is there an episode in that? Should we have done a whole episode about conspiracy theories around the death of Princess Diana, or?
So the thing is, we could do a whole episode around the death of Princess Diana. It was a fairly major event at the time. There are fairly big conspiracy theories encompassing the British royal family, Saudi oil interests, and the like, which we could all bring into it. I, for one, am not that interested in the
No,
conspiracy
no.
theories about Princess Di. That might be a regional thing. It never really was a very big story back home in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I believe it is still a relatively big story in the UK. Many people think the People's Princess was, if not offed by the British royal family, their response to her death was clearly inappropriate. And there certainly has been a lot of media coverage in the UK in the last 6 months about the consequences to Princess Di's children and other people like Paul Burrell, her butler, and his theory about what happened at the time. But personally, I'm not that interested in the Princess Di conspiracy theories. But Josh, if you want us to do an episode on the Princess Di conspiracy theories, we will do an episode on the Princess Di conspiracy theories. Do you need me to pick you up a Princess Diana tea towel when I'm in London next week?
That would be nice, but I don't know that we need an entire episode devoted to it. It just seemed worthy of mention given that it was the 20th anniversary. Also, I think the death of Princess Di, that and September 11 are the last two things I can recall of being events where it was, do you remember when you heard blah blah blah? Because pretty much ever since then, do you remember where you heard blah 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 happened? The answer is I read it on my Twitter feed. But it's just far enough in the past that it was sort of a thing that was in the news. It happened. It must have happened. I don't know, early afternoon New Zealand time, something like that. I remember I was working in a shop at the time, and customers were coming in saying, "Oh, have you heard about Princess Di? Oh, something's gone wrong. She's been in an accident or something." But every other celebrity death, Twitter.
I remember September 11th, but I actually have absolutely no recollection about when I heard about the death of Princess Diana.
Well, there you go.
No recollection whatsoever.
Yes, September 11. I was working in my first sort of proper full-time job, and I drove in. When I drove into work that day, I didn't have the radio on. I'm sure if I'd had the radio on, I would have heard it right then and there. And it wasn't until I got into work, sat myself down, turned on my computer, started reading the morning's emails, and saw a thing from a mailing list that I was signed up to, which signed off, "Our thoughts go out to everyone in New York today." And I was like, wonder what that's about. And then walked out into the main part of the office where someone had wheeled out a television that was showing the obvious non-stop wall-to-wall news coverage. And it's like, oh, okay. But yes, ever since then, the internet knows all, says all, is all.
And will end up being a featured post on Facebook and a promoted tweet on Twitter.
Anyway, from the celebrity princess to celebrity other people, shall we get into the main topic of today's episode?
Yes. Let us slide into the celebrity B-list culture that is the celebrity conspiracy theorist.
Yes, celebrity B-list. To that I say meow, and also yes, that's actually fairly accurate. There are notable names. Would we say conspiracy theorists who happen to be famous, or famous people who happen to be conspiracy theorists? Bit of both, I guess.
Why can't it be both?
It really can. So we start. This all came about because we're talking about news radio and Joe Rogan. So I guess we should start talking about Joe Rogan. So he has a podcast. He has numerous podcasts, doesn't he? Where he has talked about his conspiracy theorist views in the past. He's more nuanced than some, isn't he?
Yeah. So Joe Rogan is a stand-up comic who ended up playing a character called Joe in news radio, who was the electrical engineer who worked for the radio station. And the Joe character on news radio was a conspiracy theorist, so believer that no one had ever gone to the moon, that aliens were visiting the Earth. And so he was playing what was either an accurate portrayal of himself or a caricature of himself, and he appeared to be very good-natured about it because he was the butt of several jokes about conspiracy theories in the show, and it kind of worked. Now, when I was watching news radio back in the day, I had no idea who Joe Rogan was, but post-news radio, Joe Rogan, who went on to host things like Fear Factor and the like, basically came, to my view, as a conspiracy theorist, kind of fully formed. So you'd find out, oh, Joe Rogan doesn't believe we went to the moon. That's interesting. He said that on news radio. He must have meant it. Joe Rogan believes that UFOs are actually alien flying saucers. He said that on news radio as well. And it turns out he believes that. What an incredible actor he turns out to be. But yes, now he has a number of podcasts. I believe he's also a wrestling commentator.
MMA, I think.
And on his... Yeah, oh, yes, no, you're right. Although I think he may have done
He's
some
probably
wrestling
done a bit of it
commentating as well. Yeah, people like to dabble
They
in
do.
their different forms of hitting people in the face with fists. And he hosts a podcast called The Joe Rogan Experience and has had a TV show called Joe Rogan Questions Everything. And I think it's fair to say, as you said, he's a fairly nuanced thinker. So, for example, Joe Rogan was a quite staunch advocate that the moon landings were a hoax. Now, one of his friends, or at least one of his podcast friends, is Neil deGrasse Tyson. And they have debated the moon landing conspiracy theories on his podcast. And due to those debates, Joe Rogan has appeared to change his mind about the moon landing conspiracy theories. He's gone from saying they were hoaxed to now going he's not entirely sure what went on, but by and large he now does think we went to the moon, but that maybe some of the artifacts of that trip to the moon, images, video and the like, were faked because the original footage wasn't good enough to show.
Yes, I watched the little clip you sent me about him talking about that, where he does say, yes, we've got these photos and we can actually show that this photo is from a training mission, not from the actual moon landing, but that could just be because some dude in marketing needed a good image and there weren't enough good ones from the real footage, so they padded it out with some of this mocked up stuff. So in that clip, he was still a little bit of the well, we just don't know sort of thing. Could mean that it was all faked, but there is an innocent explanation from it, so we just don't know. He was very good at sort of acknowledging the limitations of his own knowledge, but some of that what is truth anyway stuff can go a little bit too far, and I don't. Sometimes it seems like a bit of a cop-out when you could say, well, okay, yes, there are still doubts, but the weight of evidence definitely seems to be towards this thing, which he did seem to shy away from.
Well, actually, what I find to be ironic about this, so Neil deGrasse Tyson has publicly said he thinks that philosophy doesn't really have much point in the modern age. So he's one of those people who are skeptical about philosophy, particularly the philosophy of science. But of course, what Joe Rogan was doing was armchair philosophy. This is a case of Joe Rogan saying, well, what is truth? Well, if you ask a philosopher, you'll get a whole bunch of answers as to what demarcates truth from falsehood, etc., etc. So the fact that Neil deGrasse Tyson has basically gone, well, there's no point to modern-day philosophy, has kind of bit him in the arse by Joe Rogan basically engaging in the kind of armchair philosophy that if Neil deGrasse Tyson knew more about philosophy, he'd be able to then knock on the head. Ha-ha! Point one to Joe Rogan over Neil deGrasse Tyson.
And so he's been fairly reasonable about other things as well. What have you got here? He's called chemtrails silly?
He has indeed. Very silly.
Yes. But I gather this has made him, in the same way as we saw the other week about people saying that Alex Jones is actually a secret tool of the Illuminati who's just there to rile you up and give them an excuse to form a police state or something. I understand people have been accusing Joe Rogan for the sin of being nuanced and not unquestioning of conspiracy theories, claimed that he also is some sort of tool of the Illuminati, have they?
Yes, so if you check Reddit threads about Joe Rogan, which is just one of those things that you do when you study conspiracy theories, you'll find that there are many people who are going, I used to really like Joe Rogan, he was great, but now I find he's changing his mind on things like moon landing and HAARP and chemtrails, and that makes me think that he's just out there as a stooge or a member of the Illuminati designed to try and make people think askance about conspiracy theories. So the fact that he's a nuanced conspiracy theorist has actually led to a kind of backlash against him, with people going, I liked it when you were pure. and you firmly believed in these things, contrary to any evidence people might put in front of you. But because you're willing to change your mind, I now think that maybe you never believed them in the first place and it was all an act. You're a stooge, Joe Rogan. You're one of them, a member of the invisible establishment that controls all things using Adam Smith's invisible hand. Or something of that ilk.
Something like that. Which possibly brings us to the man himself, Jesse Ventura, who was essentially the man when he was governor of... Where was he governor of? I want to say California.
Minnesota.
That was
Minnesota.
Schwarzenegger was... Anyway, yes, governor of Minnesota. But before that, he was, of course, a professional wrestler and then an actor, and such films as Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator. Both excellent films.
Sorry, the way that you put that is
Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator.
Yes, it's a special film about the people who hunt Arnold Schwarzeneggers, and he played the Arnold Schwarzenegger Predator.
He did.
Actually, that's not true.
That's what they do. They chase Arnold Schwarzeneggers and then tag them and release them into the wild, so we can track their
Actually,
migrations.
that kind of. I mean, if we treat Arnold Schwarzenegger's The Running Man, then Arnold Schwarzenegger's Predator is obviously the second film in the trilogy. What is the name of the third film in the Arnold Schwarzenegger trilogy? You've got The Running Man, Predator.
Total Recall? That doesn't really work at all, I'm sorry.
No, and Commando doesn't work.
No. Well, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando. I bet he is.
Dum, dum, dum.
Anyway, Jesse, now, I know he's something of a conspiracy theorist, but I also know that you spent a fair bit of time watching his show, because I do recall your various Twitter updates every time you'd watch an episode of it. So why don't you talk to us about your fun and frivolity and hijinks in watching Jesse Ventura's TV show?
So he had a show on several networks for several seasons called Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura. Now, this is going to be a weird analogy. Imagine Donald Trump's The Apprentice was about conspiracy theories. So you had Donald Trump in his office, and he'd have people coming in to do work for him, and then he would judge them as to whether they did the work well or not. Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura was about Jesse Ventura with his research assistants, and those research assistants going off and investigating things that Jesse Ventura wanted them to research, and then coming back with their results, and then Jesse Ventura kind of chewing them out for not getting to the bottom of this particular conspiracy theory. It was very amdram in that many of the conflicts in the show either indicated that Jesse Ventura's personality is so strong that other people really just can't match him in the room, or many of the conflicts were kind of pre-scripted, and the lack of acting ability on all parts kind of went all over the place. But yes, Jesse Ventura's Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura was an interesting show, and is the kind of show that if you didn't drink would actually make you want to start.
Oh dear. So, what sort of conspiracies did he look at? Just all the classics? All the usual ones?
Harp. In fact, actually, the Harp episode is probably the best one, because the Harp episode has him traveling to Alaska to visit the Harp installation. He goes to the gate of the Harp installation and demands to be let in. They say no, and he goes, "But I'm a former Navy SEAL. How could you not let a member of the American Armed Forces into this top secret military research base? That just seems weird." And he seems really quite flustered by the idea that he just can't walk into any top secret base anywhere in the world, because he is Jesse Ventura, former governor of Minnesota, former Navy SEAL, and thus should be allowed access to everything at any time he demands.
He does make a compelling point.
Does he? I mean, other conspiracy theories he's investigated, or at least looked into, the assassination of JFK and RFK, so he thinks there's something more to the official story, so he doesn't think that Oswald acted alone, and he thinks there's something very suspicious about the theory that Sirhan actually killed Robert Kennedy. And he is a 9/11 conspiracy theorist. At the very least, he's a LIHOP theorist, and that at the very least he thinks that the CIA knew a lot more about what was going on that day, and they may well have let it happen on purpose, although he has also dallied with controlled demolition theses as well.
So in this show, was it a regular thing? Was it sort of standard that people would fail to unearth proof positive that this conspiracy theory was true, and then would then get chewed out by him? Did he ever reach any sort of real conclusions?
It did seem in Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, the conclusion was already stated at the beginning of the show, and the show was devoted to showing that people were trying to get in the way of Jesse Ventura getting to the truth he already knew.
Right. Ah, well, if we're talking about 9/11 conspiracy theorists, then maybe now would be the time to bring in Charlie Sheen, he of the tiger blood and porn star
and
goddesses
2.5 Men and
ridiculous amounts of cocaine.
And Hot Shots, and Hot Shots Part 2.
Well, that was back when he was funny, yes. Yes, I do recall him being quite a fan of the Loose Change documentary, for one thing. And what was the deal? He actually wanted to talk to Obama about 9/11?
Yeah, so when Barack Obama was first elected president of the United States of America, Charlie Sheen wanted to organize a meeting with Barack Obama to show Barack Obama the evidence that 9/11 was in fact an inside job. And my favorite quote of all time comes out of an LA Times report about this proposed meeting between Charlie Sheen and Barack Obama, where the reporter quite seriously says, but when someone with the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen issues a statement, anyone is forced to listen. Now, I loved this quote so much, I used it in my PhD dissertation, and I also used it in my book. Because, let me repeat it again, but when someone with the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen issues a statement, anyone is forced to listen.
I know that
I just find that to be the most hyperbolic statement of all time. And I realize that's hyperbole at the same time, or even hyperbole as some people might pronounce it. It's just brilliant.
Yes, no,
someone with the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen.
I certainly, when I think
of
Charlie Sheen...
Do you have the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen?
Well, surely only Charlie Sheen has the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen. When I think Charlie Sheen, though, I think gravitas. Like, that's essentially his middle name.
Oh, yes. I mean,
Possibly
when I think of great characters through history, Aristotle, Socrates, Moses, Darrell from the convenience store downstairs, I put Charlie Sheen into that list. They've got the kind of gravitas that means that history will remember them no matter what crappy sitcom they've been in.
Yes, probably will. Or been fired from. Or whatever it was. Did they actually dump him? Because they replaced him with Ashton Kutcher. Was that because he got fired? They killed his character. Was that because he got fired, or did he quit in a huff of or disappear in a puff of cocaine dust? And
see, you're talking
I'm
about
assuming he got fired.
Which I never liked.
No, I never
followed. I mean, I know he didn't get on well with the showrunner, Chuck Lorre, and was making all sorts of claims about Chuck Lorre being one of those Jews who runs Hollywood. And that's the kind of thing that might well get you fired from the show that Chuck Lorre is running. But what we do know is he left the show, and they killed his character off in a tragic subway accident. Off screen.
Yes, and I recall he was giving Chuck Lorre shit for changing his name. His name originally was more sort of stereotypically Jewish sounding, and he changed it to Chuck Lorre. And people said, "Oh, you're complaining about someone changing their overly ethnic name, are you, Carlos Estevez?"
Dun dun dun. We should also point out at this juncture that Martin Sheen, his more famous father, is also said to be a skeptic of the official theory of 9/11. So that's another
and
big name.
And he played the president.
So he would. Oh, and actually, and that also reminds me of my other favorite Charlie Sheen moment, which is I'm not quite sure how to characterize this, but when Charlie Sheen was doing his tour of America, which did seem to be a tour based upon psychosis brought to drug use and other things at the time, people in the Japanese media chastised Martin Sheen, former president of the United States, for not bringing his son in line. And that was somewhat odd, where some people in the media in Japan thought that Martin Sheen actually had been a president of the United States of America, and thus he had the obligation as a leader of the free world to make sure his son wasn't doing stupid things on TV.
I can't fault their logic, quite frankly. Well, let's move on from Charlie Sheen then. Now, there have been a few cases. I sort of thought, what about other people who've come up with weird conspiracy theories? Didn't Randy Quaid say a lot of weird stuff? And then I thought, actually, Randy Quaid was kind of suffering from mental illness, wasn't he? That's probably not fair to call him a conspiracy. I think Margot Kidder famously played Lois Lane in the Christopher Reeve Superman movies. She was similar. She was the same. I think she also had some quite odd beliefs, but I believe those were down to some form of schizophrenia. So unfortunate. Probably doesn't count as actual conspiracy theorist, though.
Well, it does get you into that kind of interesting ground where psychologists will point out that some people do indeed go through stages of paranoid ideation, and as part of that paranoid ideation, develop conspiracy theories about what's going on around them. And we need to be cautious when we're talking about cases of paranoia to separate that from cases of people theorizing about conspiracies. Because, yes, it is possible that you may well have a psychological condition that means you start expressing things which get called conspiracy theories in public parlance, but that doesn't necessarily make them stereotypical conspiracy theorists. Indeed, that's probably not the norm. Most people come up with conspiracy theories through the analysis of evidence, looking for patterns within the world, making inferences, and the like. And only a subset of the people we call conspiracy theorists are likely to be people who are suffering from some form of paranoia. And the Randy Quaid situation and the Margot Kidder situation are unfortunate examples where you might want to generalize from their experiences to conspiracy theorists in general, despite the fact that they are a subset of the people we might label as conspiracy theorists.
Now, someone I think we would be much more comfortable labelling as a conspiracy theorist, of course, is Jenny McCarthy. We've got to talk about her, since she is the world's most prominent anti-vaxxer, who now I think claims she isn't anti-vax at all, doesn't she?
Well, she claims that she was never anti-vaccine, but rather pro-safe vaccines, which by extension means she's anti-current vaccines, which she takes to be unsafe. So she's now claiming she's never been about not vaccinating children, despite the fact actually there's footage of her making that claim. That actually she's always been about spacing out the vaccines, that the vaccines just need to be spaced out so children don't get them in one hit. But no, she is a prominent anti-vaxxer with respect to claiming that the MMR vaccine is responsible for the uptick in autism rates in the Western world.
Yes, so she was a big fan of Andrew Wakefield, he of the now discredited paper, which is what basically got the whole vaccines called autism ball rolling. He didn't invent it, did he? But he sort of popularized the idea that vaccines might be associated with autism. I believe she wrote the foreword to one of his books, in fact, and went on Oprah Winfrey's show, went on the Larry King show to talk about the fact that her son, who has been diagnosed with autism, obviously got it from his vaccines. Wasn't she the one who ended up, when I think it was on Oprah, when she was sort of debating with a doctor there who was there to say no vaccines don't cause autism? Wasn't she the one who was actually jumping up and shouting shame on you, and poking her finger in his face at the time? I'm pretty sure that was her. So,
I believe that's true.
So she's got a lot of attention, and yes, whatever she claims now, she was fairly unequivocal in her views in the past. So now she still says that her son has got autism because of vaccines, but it's more now, as you say, she's the space it out thing. So she thinks giving kids too many vaccines all at once weakens their immune system in such a way as to cause autism, which also is a view that I believe does not have any genuine medical foundation. But it's less, I guess, controversial than the full-on anti-vax thing, because she's no longer telling parents they should not vaccinate their children at all. She just does the whole, yes, it should be the parents' choice, and know the facts and be safe and space them out. Do we want to say anything about the fact that the likes of, like, yeah, as you've said, none of these, Charlie Sheen has probably been the most famous of the people we've talked about so far, and we've a few more on the list, and none of them really rise much above B-list celebrity. Is there any...
Fans of Muse are going to be very disappointed.
What is the name of the lead singer of Muse, without looking?
Matt Bellamy.
Okay, but you just looked. Okay, that sucks.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll get onto him in a minute. But I just want to say, nevertheless, the likes of Oprah Winfrey, one of the most powerful women in media, and Larry King, one of the biggest talk show hosts at the time, they gave Jenny McCarthy a platform.
In fact, Oprah Winfrey has given Dr. Oz a platform, and Dr. Oz has many conspiracy theories about medicine. So whilst Oprah Winfrey and Larry King may not be pejoratively labelled conspiracy theorists par excellence, they certainly have allowed certain conspiracy theorists to portray their views in the media. Now, this is the point in time where I should remind listeners that we do not take conspiracy theorists to be a pejorative label, even though the examples we're talking about in this episode we seem to be treating quite pejoratively. But people like Dr. Oz, people like Jenny McCarthy seem to have what are largely unwarranted conspiracy theories, which they're given national platforms to espouse. And that ends up being a problem because the evidence is not being debated there. It ends up being a clash of personalities instead.
But now, you mentioned Matt Bellamy of Muse. Let's have a quick look at him. What does he believe?
UFOs, Joshua. He believes in UFOs, and not just unidentified flying objects. He believes in alien spacecraft.
Probably not a surprise if you've listened to any of their music, to be honest.
I think all of their songs basically sound the same.
I don't know. Yeah, but the Knights of Sidonia, obviously, has an excellent music video, and Supermassive Black Hole is a bit of fun. I don't know. I've never my.
See, I prefer both Nights in White Saturn and Black Hole Sun.
As well, you might. My wife has seen them live. I have not seen them live, but she reckoned they were one of the best shows she's ever seen live. So maybe they do have something going for them. I don't know. Just saying.
I have nothing to say on Matt Bellamy whatsoever.
Yeah, well, we barely should have mentioned them. Who knows? Now, so we get to the dregs of the conspiracy theorist celebrity list. When it comes to flat earthers, because we've talked about this before, this is something that's cropped up more recently. First rapper B.O.B. was espousing his flat earther views, causing... he actually... He made the Neil Tyson diss track, didn't he? And then Neil deGrasse Tyson went on The Daily Show and returned fire, as it were, at B.O.B. But there's been a few others. Tia Tequila, I'm not even sure what her deal is. I just know she's...
Isn't she a Nazi now?
Is she? I honestly...
I think so. I'm fairly sure she ended up coming out as a white supremacist.
Yeah, given that she's not white herself, that's not bad. Yeah, she's she's a name that I see on gossip sites. I don't know what she's famous for, other than being mildly famous. I'm sure people will tell us on Twitter afterwards. But yeah, she was a flat earther. There've been a couple of others whose names I don't remember, basically because they were names I hadn't really heard of before. The whole
I should point out, I just did a search here. In November 22nd, 2016, Twitter suspended former social media star Tia Tequila's account following a string of neo-Nazi tweets.
Oh, there you go. Is she a social media celebrity? One of those ones the kids are into on their YouTube channels with their Instagram makeup tutorials and their unboxing YouTube swag videos and stuff.
Oh, we are so down with the kids. We are so down with the kids.
Like you wouldn't believe.
Millennials love our podcast.
I assume. It's one of the few things they're not killing, according to mainstream media.
They probably like to listen to it whilst eating avocado on toast, whilst not buying houses or cars.
Indeed.
Or saving for the future, because there is no future for them to save for. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, boomers.
Yep. Millennials, if you want to be like me, a person who owns his own home, it's perfectly simple. All you need to do is acquire a functional time machine, go back in time 10 years, and buy a house at the same time as I bought a house. It's quite simple, Matthew. But these days, the kids, they just won't do it. They just won't put in the effort to invent time travel.
Millennials will not bother to build a kit set time machine that hasn't been invented yet.
Yeah. But that's
just lazy.
Simple as that. No, I do love the ones where people say, "Look, if you start saving, then in 10 years you'll have enough enough to afford a deposit on a house." It's just discipline and saving, and it's like, well, you're basing it on the amount for a deposit on a house now. So really, what you're saying is, if you had started saving 10 years ago, you'd have enough to buy a deposit now, but at the rate prices are going up. Anyway. You have my sympathy,
because
millennials.
House prices
you are screwed.
Increasing at a rate in New Zealand, at least, higher than inflation, and wages are not increasing at a rate higher than inflation. So there is no way to save at this stage to buy a house.
No.
It is financially impossible.
No.
I mean, that's, of course, people say that people do go buying houses. It's a case of yes, because they have access to other funds that aren't their wages.
Anyway.
Trust fund. Money in the bank, stuff like that.
So, millennials, you have my sympathy, although I own a house, so meh.
So you're saying they have your sympathy, but you won't give them your house?
No, it's my house. I'm sorry. It's where I put all my stuff.
I didn't realise that you turned into a boomer, Joshua. How very disappointing. You're probably going to vote National this election.
I'll vote at least 3 ticks for National, I think.
One tick for the party vote, 1 tick for the electoral vote, and 1 tick because they deserve it.
They deserve it. They do. No, they don't. Now, so I think we've come to the end of our little list. Did you have something to say about the fact that these celebrities are all perhaps on the lower end of the celebrity scale? Or were you just being a bitch?
No, I have a feeling that the reason why B-list celebrities get to be conspiracy theorists and A-list celebrities don't is probably due to good management. So I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out your Brad Pitts, your George Clooney's, your Steve Buscemi's, your A-list celebrities. I always assume that Steve Buscemi is the top A-list celebrity at any particular point in time.
He has to be, surely.
Probably have all sorts of views that many people would consider weird and many people would pejoratively label as conspiracy theories. But these views don't get espoused, or when they are espoused, they're downplayed because their management goes, no, don't say that. That's a bad thing to do. Whilst B-list celebrities probably are looking for as much media attention as possible, and so will say all sorts of things which their management, in retrospect, might be better off going, no, don't say that. That's not going to aid your chances of getting a new role. And so I think to a certain extent, it's not that conspiracy theories make some celebrities go on the B-list. I think to get on the A-list, you need a kind of representation that means you're not allowed to espouse conspiracy theories. So as I say, I wouldn't be surprised if many of the big-name stars and the big-name celebrities actually also share a lot of these views. But if it's not them saying, I've got the sense not to talk about this in public, it's their management going, Brad said that thing again, let's hope that no one picks up on it.
I think the one exception to this, and possibly it is the exception that proves the rule, is of course Mel Gibson, who has.
Is he really an A-list celebrity? I mean, I suspect
he's pretty bloody.
As
a director,
he wasn't. Yeah. So right. So
he certainly was
this
one.
is a good point.
And he's certainly
so
a powerful
A-list
force in
celebrity.
Hollywood.
He then espoused anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and fell out of favour, and has managed to get back in favour as a director, not so much as an actor, more as a director, And what's interesting is that Mel Gibson isn't really talking about the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories anymore as he's been rehabilitated. So I think that kind of speaks to both our points. Mel Gibson fell from grace because of his anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. His management then went, Mel, you've got to stop doing that, and also possibly stop drinking. And then once he was able to show the ability to not mouth off about the Jews all the time, he was able to rehabilitate himself in a way which actually does seem kind of unseemly, because his anti-Semitic outbursts are not that far away in the past. And also there's no real evidence that he's actually sought any kind of forgiveness for those outbursts. It's as if we're deciding to forget he ever said those things.
Yes, especially I think that wasn't what caused his transition to be more of a director. I think he was still in his directorial phase, especially the one infamous incident when he was pulled over by the cop and went on a tirade at her. But yes, no, I agree. I think this might be almost the opposite of what we were saying, but in a sense, because he was a big enough star, he could get away. He could have that swept under. Only I'm sure if he was mouthing off about that sort of stuff all the time, then yes, he would end up persona non grata fairly quickly. But he was a big enough star that he could get away with a little blip like that, and people wouldn't mind. That he went
I
on.
like the fact that we're talking about strident anti-Semitic conspiracy theories as a bit of a blip.
Well, yes, in terms of his career rather than in absolute moral terms. And then, yes, people would say, okay, well, we might as well let him direct a movie about how the Jews killed Jesus. I'm sure nothing bad will come of that.
No, not at all. And of course, ironically, Mel Gibson was in the film Conspiracy Theory.
He was, yes, he was.
Where he turned out to be right the entire time. That was a gift from God, that was.
Well, I never seen it, to be honest.
Basically, he thinks that Patrick Stewart is out to get him, and it turns out he's right.
Well, that's not much of a leap, is it, surely? I assume Patrick Stewart's out to get me. It's just a matter of time.
It's true.
He's coming for us. He's coming for all of us.
He's been lurking in the cafe downstairs for weeks now, and I'm just waiting for him to make his move.
Oh well, off to watch Life Force again, I suppose. The best film anyone ever made. Love it so much.
Tobe Hooper is dead.
Exactly. Yes, I'm going to watch it in a tribute to Tobe Hooper.
And
Thank
I'm
you for
assuming
reminding
it's because his life force was taken away from him.
I'll allow that pun, quite frankly.
It was a pretty bad pun.
Nevertheless, I consider it a fitting tribute to both the genius of Tobe Hooper and the genius of the film Life Force, which is genius.
And I'm assuming that rather than be cremated, Tobe Hooper was put into the mangler.
Hopefully. Or at the very least, dismembered with
made
a
into
chainsaw.
delicious chili con carne.
Anyway, have we come to an end? Is that it? Are we done?
I actually think we came to an end. Well, actually, no, Josh. Tell me, why have we been talking about celebrity conspiracy theorists?
We've been talking about celebrity conspiracy theorists because you love news radio, Matthew. That's essentially it. That's the only reason why we got onto this topic. Your love of news radio.
But is there a moral that we can draw from this discussion about celebrity conspiracy theorists? Because people who listen to this podcast and skeptics of our particular method of doing things that go, well, you say that you think that conspiracy theories can be warranted, and you say you don't use conspiracy theorists in a pejorative sense, might have been listening to this podcast going, look, it's true what we thought about them the entire time. They're just out there to make fun of conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists. So what is the moral for our discussion of these pejoratively labeled conspiracy theorists we've been talking about for the last half hour?
Well, I think the moral perhaps is simply that celebrities in many senses are just like us. In many senses they're not. But they can espouse...
Completely vague.
But they can... I personally do not have millions of followers on Instagram, nor have I ever appeared on any gossip site that I know of. Nor have I ever released a hit album or starred in a sitcom. But, in spite of all my numerous failings, celebrities who are not me, manage to come up with things that regular salt of the earth ordinary people, not salt of the earth, Matthew, never salt of the earth, salt of the
we
earth.
don't talk about
no,
the
salt of the earth ordinary people come up with as well. Celebrities are human beings with reasoning faculties, which they can use to come to conclusions that we would label conspiracy theories. We've been talking about the wacky ones because those are A, the ones that it's fun for us to talk about, and B, the ones that will get reported on. I can't imagine if a celebrity came out and supported the idea that the Russian show trials were a conspiracy, that the media would be all over that. It's only when B.O.B. says the world is flat and Jenny McCarthy says vaccines cause autism that people pay attention. I think basically conspiracy theories, as we always say, should be judged on their own merits, and human beings should be judged on the words that issue forth from their noise holes as to whether or not they are a little bit clever or a little bit silly.
So I'd go slightly further. I think part of the problem we have with the term celebrity is that, of course, celebrity is different from the term expert.
Yes.
And the issue with celebrity is that what a celebrity says is taken to be important, no matter what the context is. So let's go back to that Charlie Sheen quote. Maybe when someone with the gravitas of a Charlie Sheen issues a statement about acting, anyone is forced to listen. Although I don't think I'm committed to that claim, but maybe that's the most charitable reading. But Charlie Sheen, as an actor, doesn't seem to have the requisite authority when it comes to discussions of 9/11. Although I might be wrong. Maybe Charlie Sheen really is actually the best expert on 9/11 you can possibly refer to. So when someone with the gravitas of Charlie Sheen talks about 9/11, should someone be forced to listen? Or do we only get told about it because they're a celebrity?
That does appear to be more the case than not, quite frankly. Is that sufficiently moralistic for the moral of this episode?
It's close enough to a moral that I think that we can pretend that we've done something virtuous and begin the process of winding the podcast down.
I'm just proud that neither of us got into dodgy Arnold Schwarzenegger impressions when discussing the career of Jesse Ventura.
It's true. I was going to go, what got Jesse so spooked, but I didn't.
No, there was absolutely no context to bring in the phrase "Escute, not assassins." And
Get us out of this hole!
Get to the chopper, yeah. They just want more air. Anyway, so we've come to the end of an episode, so we should do the usual end of episode rappy-uppy business, I suppose. I noticed the call quality seems to have been quite good all the way through. Or at least it has been on my end anyway.
And on my end too. So the intro might have sounded a little bit off to listeners, but the rest of the episode just fine and dandy.
You're
just like your mum.
Yeah, no, not bad. A little bit weak, quite frankly, but I'll take it.
Just like your mum.
Like your mum, yes. No, I've forgotten what I was going to say completely. What were we talking about?
You're a little bit weak.
Oh, call quality. Yes. No, I was going to say you're a little bit. You're slightly out of your video is slightly out of phase with your voice, or maybe that's just you. Maybe you've just got
Yes, I've actually been practicing this technique all week to try and make the video look as bad as possible.
Like Dracula's shadow in the Bram Stoker's Dracula thing. You've got that. Maybe you've been spending too long in Romania. Maybe this is just what happens. Are you a vampire, Matthew? You can tell me. You have to tell me if you are one. It's like being an undercover cop.
Vampires cannot be seen in mirrors or in recording equipment.
No, that depends on who's...
But at the same time, my voice is out of sync. So maybe I'm talking off camera and my double is trying to keep up with me. And because my double is Romanian and isn't very fluent in English, that means that there's this kind of weird lag thing going on.
Possibly.
Apparently.
Isn't that... I haven't seen or read Guillermo del Toro's The Strain books, but I understand they have a thing there where the vampires eventually lose the ability to speak, but because they're psychic, the particularly clever vampires are able to sort of move their lips in time with the thoughts they're projecting so as to make it look like they're actually speaking. So essentially that's what I'm accusing you of right now. You vampire, you.
Well, I also haven't seen or read anything of the strain, so I'll just take your word for it.
Okay. Oh, well, enough vampire talk then. You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, featuring me, not a vampire, and him. We'll just have to see.
Quite probably
quite
a vampire.
frankly. Otherwise known as Joshua Addison, the not vampire, and Dr. Matthew R.X. Dentith, at the very least one of those half-human, like Blade from the movie Blade
Vampire.
people.
Or Blood Rain.
I'm in Auckland, he's in Romania. We're both on Twitter, though. Such is the magic of the internet. If you want to get in touch with me, you can fire something towards the username Monkey Fluids. With Matthew, it's Conspiracism, or indeed H.O. Ransom. That's ransom with an E on the end. Do you still try to keep the demarcation of the Conspiracism one as for conspiracy-related stuff, and the H.O. Ransom is more personal? If we want to get a steering insight into your soul and what really drives you and motivates you.
Basically, I try to keep H.O. Ransom as being things I'm watching on TV and blasé political commentary about what's going on back home, and the Conspiracism account is me retweeting things about conspiracy theories and sometimes tweeting myself about conspiracy theories.
Everyone does like to tweet themselves from time to time. I've been doing it this entire time.
That's true. Just like your mum.
He's reaching a little bit there, just like your mum. Yes. Now, what's left? Oh,
this joke is now officially old.
I think maybe it's time to put it to rest.
Like your
Just
mum.
like your mum. Episto.org is what I was going to say. Episto.org is Matthew's website. You should go there. He puts up mirrors of this podcast and videos as they become available, and various other articles and blog posts. And I assume this is where you do your Instagram makeup tutorials on Episto.org.
It's true.
Yeah.
My makeup tutorials are amazing. You should seek them out.
You did do quite a good undead Buddy Holly at that Halloween party one time. Maybe you should do that.
I was very, very pleased with that.
That worked out quite nicely. Maybe you should do a tutorial of that one. Speaking of where the podcast is hosted, you can get to it on iTunes, you can get to it on Stitcher, you can find it at its natural home of Podbean if you go to the website conspiracism.podbean.com. No matter how you're listening to it, or indeed how you're looking at it if you happen to be watching the YouTube version of this episode, although let's face it, nobody bloody is, because why would you sit in front of a screen that monopolizes your entire time when you could be listening to it while you're doing something else? But I don't know, it's up to you, it's a free world. No matter how you're experiencing this podcast, please do the thing where you rate and review and like and subscribe and comment and all of that other bollocks, which apparently is what you're supposed to beg shamelessly to do at the end of every bloody episode and every YouTube thing I watch ever, because we're just whores, Matthew. We're whores for the attention of all around us. Does that count as slut-shaming? Did I just slut-shame us, Matthew?
Yes, you did.
No, probably should.
And I'm judging you for it now.
Probably shouldn't have done that. Whatever. Just like us, you bastards. And I think that's all there is to say. Oh no, it's not all there is to say, because we're going out on a song, as we always do. The song this week is "Foolish Human." Just because. Draw take from that, whatever you will. It's by Tab and Anitek. We've heard it before. I'm sure I've used it on an older episode, but it's a song that I actually genuinely like, and it also seemed mildly appropriate given the topic of today's discussion.
And we're all about being mildly appropriate at all times.
Just like your mum.
Your mother. No, my mother. Your mother is a saint. I got that wrong.
You did that a little bit. Doesn't matter. The end. Goodbye. My name's Josh. See you later. Let's go out on a song. Matthew, any last words?
La-di-da-dee.
That'll do. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
You've been listening to the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, starring Josh Addison and Matthew R.X. Dentith, and produced by Matthew R.X. Dentith. If you've enjoyed the Podcaster's Guide to the Conspiracy, why not contribute to our Patreon or Podbean patron page? And you can contact us on podcastconspiracy@gmail.com. That's podcastconspiracy@gmail.com.